This is the second project in the class called Fantasy Body. We're going to design torso, limbs. We're going to talk about primarily the entire body minus the head. So we're going to start just with ideas. We want to branch out on ideas. You can use the idea that you had with the fantasy hand. And in my idea, I'm going to continue in that direction. So my direction was using bird feathers, scaly skin, nails coming off like talons. It just evolved in that direction. I didn't do a specific design and go in that way. It's not a character design class, so to speak, but you will have to put thought and research into what direction you're going. But perhaps you do have a character you've always been planning and wanting and willing to use. I started with birdmen or bird-like creatures and just going a little bit deeper and what's out there already in the ocean of the internet. Of course, these came up, some golden age of cartooning, Hanna-Barbera, Birdman, Harvey, Birdman Attorney at Law, which is different versions of cartoons, and maybe have some favorite avatar or character that you identify or if you've drawn before or used. In this specific example, I have gone in this bird-like direction, and I will continue to go in that direction with my body. So these are the hands that I did create that came out of that evolution. And looking at the different types of ways to not just create a fantasy anthropomorphized creature, but in what way will it look? In what kind of material? These highly illustrational and rendered versions look really good, almost like a painting here. And these are watercolor examples of feathers. I could go in all sort of media directions too, more hyper-realistic, or maybe this is a stop motion where you can really tactily feel the materials. Or I could go in a direction that's a little simpler and more cartoony. Because of the limited time of this project, I'm going to start in a more cartoony direction, and I've created designs that are taking off in this direction. So of all the stuff I researched, this little kid with these homemade cardboard wings seemed really appealing and charming to me. That what if it was just a put together kind of a look that is sort of a do-it-yourself superhero who uses cardboard to create his or her or their own appendages. So instead of having very realistic or real or fantasy perfect looking feathers, it's going to have something that looks like it's constructed out of cheap materials, perhaps, to give it a humorous feel. Also, this image came in as a joke. Boston Celtics legendary basketball player Larry Bird. I thought actually it might be funny and go in the side of humor to include some of his identity into a character. That obviously is a play on words, play on his name, play on his skill as a basketball player, and also poke a little bit of fun at anatomy. So this is the character that I came up with, a kind of innocent and cartoony, little bit goofy vision of an anthropomorphized bird creature based on Larry and his number here. I took out Celtics and his name just to be a little bit more nondescript with an already descript subject matter. So I designed him with a recognizable real-looking head, real-looking face, and these cardboard strap-on wings. He actually has a mask that could be taken on and off. I turn off layers here. I can see the masks turning off. Turn off the other mask. You can kind of see the mask from the back. Anyhow, I have the front view, the side view, and the back view. In modeling, I'll probably use the front view and the side view most, but this is really helpful and descriptive. The design direction was to use these cut-out paper or card paper craft like wings and have his exaggerated body with large head and stork-like bird legs that actually bend backwards. There's those nails here and here coming through. My plan is to use those fantasy hands in the first project and utilize them. I will modify them a bit. That is, I'll modify the hands and the color a bit to fit here because I want a skin kind of a blue, and I arbitrarily chose these colors so they would pop out. There's no symbolism too much with that, but someone can read into it if they like. So I will use those hands and actually connect it to the arms and the rest of the body. So for this project, I won't be making the head. I could be designing this project as a full character, but I'm going to leave the head, which is much more complex, even more complex than the hands perhaps, because it could possibly move and speak. I'm going to leave that until the final or the third project. So really all we're designing at this point is the body. So this is why this project is called Fantasy Body. But we have to keep mindful of the different body parts as they're coming and the number of CVs and edges where they come together, we'll see pretty quickly. It's going to be important in your design how you pose the character in preparation for modeling, that you have the arms outstretched in this kind of T pose. The limbs of the arm should be splayed as much as possible without exaggeration, something like this. And I am lining up those outstretched arms and legs with lines here, which I can just grab in Photoshop from the top. If you want to do that type of a line and to get rid of them, I can throw them off. That might be temporary for lining up things in Photoshop, or you can use, of course, your own lines. This character I'm creating, called Larry Birdman, so his arms are all the way outstretched, not completely stretched like this because it doesn't anticipate the movement of a skeleton if it were put in there. So something like this in form of a T-pose would be decent. I might have an issue right here where these two toes are close together. It seems easy enough to correct, but when you draw the legs for your character, these are very, very skinny, but if you had fat legs that came really close together, it would be an issue, and you would have to splay them more between each other. So design your body with negative space between the limbs. Not a total starfish design that would be too splayed or too exaggerated, but enough of a large gap between all of them, all the limbs in this T-pose, which will make it easier to model and easier to possibly animate later if that's what you needed. Okay, a few notes on its design and construction. These right here, I don't plan to model with geometry. The feathers, the red parts and the brown parts, all these parts. Paint effects would also be too heavy for this character to use and interact. I'm going to use a different technique called transparency maps, or cards, C-A-R-D-S, that are amply used in video games and other interactive formats. There'll be a designed transparency map to create the mask, to create all this coming off. And the body, which is blue, all the parts of the body, and of course the head too. Here I just turned off the jersey layer here so you can see. I'm going to model everything that's blue. Of course, attach the hands. I'm going to leave a hole for the head for later. And it's going to go all the way through and attach to the legs. All the blue parts pretty much I'm going to model in volume and Maya as polygonal mesh. And the red parts are going to be separate cards, which it's okay. Otherwise, having one mesh for the whole thing is ideal, but in some situations it's not feasible, not reasonable. So if you have any armor or something attached to the character, gives a light interaction and a very reasonable situation to repose and animate. So again, everything blue is going to be volumetric mesh, and everything red and brown here is going to be flat transparency cards, which give the illusion of having depth like cardboard or cutout paper. And if you had feathers or fur or something like that, or hair, you could similarly use cards to achieve that. Now you may be wondering about the jersey. Should the jersey be a separate piece of geometry or clothing added on after modeling the blue part? Well, the issue there would be interactivity as well. I could model him without any clothing and put clothing on him. Maya has something called cloth. There's different tools in Maya to create cloth. They are troublesome for your first project, and it might be troublesome if you do them in a capstone. I don't want to discourage you, but for this project, I am not going to use any dynamics. That is, cloth simulations or simulations of real material to act and look like cloth. It's not really the design of the character, which is very cartoony and sort of absurd in a Terry Gilliam kind of way. So that means the jersey is just going to be modeled out of the skin. This green will be part of the same geometry as the blue. I will just texture map it to make it look like it's separate. And any way the character will move, if it does have a rig and animate, the jersey will move with it and it will look just fine. We won't expect all these fluffy folds and wrinkles to happen as he's moving anyway, considering the design of the character. So I will be focused just on the body for this second project assignment. Turning off the head, and in the mask, as I mentioned, I'll model that mask in the last assignment too, so I'll turn that off. I will be just focused on modeling the body. So just like the hand image planes, I will take the front view here, I'll take the side view here, and insert those in the front image plane and the side image plane, and work primarily there, seldomly growing toward working in the perspective view, just like I modeled the hands. This back view will be informational. I can also include it as a image plane that alternates display within the front, because we don't really have a back camera. We haven't set that up. That is, we can just interchange these two images whenever in the modeling process we need. Should mention I put all this together excuse me, rather quickly in Photoshop just to give image. If you feel you're not an illustrator or don't want to create some sort of well-drawn illustrational character study, as I showed in those other examples, that's not quite the point of the class. And I would emphasize keeping your character simple and achievable within the time of the project and assignment. You could opt for more cartoony or more simplified designs rather than going photorealistic or highly detailed or militaristic, or something where you're going to spend an enormous amount of time doing texture maps or bump maps, as well as in and outs of modeling CVs and edges in the mesh. So whatever your design is, let me know. Show it to me before you begin so you don't jump off a cliff with an impossible project within the time to finish it. And then simplicity will be your guide. One important thing to mention when designing the characters, and you're going to do a front view, a side view, optional back view. You don't have to do this back view. It does help when you have detail on the back side, like the jersey. Well, what's important is that these are all lined up. So I have these lines here. Find the landmark features of the character, like the eyes, and it goes through it. I just have a layer there and keeping a PSD file, so I have all my layers nice and organized and color coded. It helps. So for the feet, of course, and I did one at the knee, one at the top of the jersey, one at the eye level, one at the top of the head. I could do one for the tip of that nose, the tip of his nose. Also, if you notice the ear, I exaggerated the ear, so it's coming close to there. And when I do bring the image planes into my, I know it's roughly, if not closely, going to line up and cause no confusion between where I push and pull the mesh and a struggle, tug of war between what two image planes say. Okay, so the more effort you put in carefully lining up the features from the front and the side views, etc., everything you can. I'm using the image warp tool in Photoshop if I need to warp a little part of the feature to better fit within the lines that designate the landmark areas to match. When you come up with your character, just spend a little time brainstorming of what that identity might be, what it can do, any research study involved in a real personality. Try to morph it or split it hybridize it between something else. So you don't want to just take someone else's design. That just means you haven't researched enough. Everybody has this emulation or imitation thing, but just spend the time going in the internet, whatever your idea is, and find any example that already exists, and it's your obligation to do so. And just quickly come and synthesize things if you have no idea, if you feel like a blank canvas and you want to put some new identity together. Just make sure everything is well blended into a new result, and think about what is personal about that choice, that it's going to keep your interest. Who knows, you're a fan of basketball, or you're a fan of something else, or a game, something that is a little footnote that will keep you interested beyond just the technical parts of the assignment. So feel free to completely redesign your character that's not like the fantasy hand into a new thing if you feel bored with your fantasy hand result and want to go in a new direction. It means a little bit more work and design, but it is worth it in the long run, because all the rest of the class is sort of hinging on one project to another. All right, thanks.